Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode brought to you by Trees Engineering. This is the place where we dive deeper into the oil and gas world and have all our questions answered by top-notch professionals. My name is Nadia, and today I'm joined with my colleague slash co-host Siti. This will be our third podcast episode, and we're so excited to introduce to you the topic and our guest for today. So basically, we'll be discovering what it's like to work in the offshore industry, what does working offshore even mean, and perhaps get some of our audience listening inspired to pursue a career at sea. So before we start, I want to ask Siti. So you've basically been working in the oil and gas industry for quite some time now. Can you perhaps briefly share to our listeners what exactly is the offshore industry? Like, what does it mean when people say they're working offshore?
Okay. I feel like I'm the wrong person to ask, but yeah. I've been around for only 2 years, so my understanding is quite shallow. Um, in short, I would say it's basically working at the ocean, at sea. Working on oil rigs. So you have engineers, you have safety inspectors. Yeah, basically in a sentence, that's what I know. But I
Hmm.
think Soup can definitely elaborate better than me.
Yeah, for sure. So, without further ado, let us introduce our special guest for today, Suphasan, or as we like to call him, Soup. He's currently working as Operation Performance Manager, and he's actually had an extensive experience in the offshore life. So, hi, Soup. How are you today?
Hello, ladies. How are you? Hello, Nadia. Hello, Siti.
I am
Hi.
good.
Yeah, we're really excited. By the way, we're really like curious to know more about like the offshore life because we're not engineers, so it's a very fascinating topic. Um, so can you like briefly like talk about your experience in the offshore life and what is it actually what actually is like offshore work?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to actually speak about offshore life with you guys. And it's also a bit of my, bucket list to actually be on a podcast. So this is an opportunity for myself as well. So thank you very much. First of all, before I jump straight into the question, just a brief background of myself. I'm my name is Suphasan Booratana, or you can call me Sup. I've been in the oil and gas industry in general for about slightly more than 10 years, 11, 12 years. So my background has always been in the drilling operations or upstream drilling operations. While the recent times or currently I'm with Bumi Armada, which is an FPSO, or I'm with operations working with the FPSO business segment, doing more on the operations reporting and stuff. So, yes, back to your question. So you were asking me about what is offshore industry in general. So
Yeah.
basically, the offshore industry in Malaysia is commonly associated with the oil and gas industry in general. When we talk about offshore industry, people always talk about oil and gas. But bear in mind that oil and gas industry is actually quite huge in the sense of it also has onshore, offshore works, onshore operations as well. But because of Malaysia's oil and gas landscape, offshore industry is commonly associated with the oil and gas industry. So what is working in the offshore industry is basically you are not working on the mainland, and that is considered as an offshore already, meaning that it could be you working on a vessel, production platform, drilling rigs, or any kind that is not on the mainland basis. So that is considered offshore industry as a whole. Yeah. I hope that
Mhm.
answers your question.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I think that was very clear. And offshore, like setting aside the generational differences that we might have now, what are actually the pros of working offshore? Like, why is it exciting? Like, what is the reward for you?
Uh, I mean, I'm 35 now. So when I first got my engineering degree, that was what late 2000. I mean, around 2009 to 2011, that period. So
Mm,
that period was still at the hype where everyone who does engineering wants to step into the oil and gas industry. Basically, everyone wants to work offshore for the promised pay that or for the pay that the industry is offering, I would say. So for fresh grads, it was one of the highest paying fresh grad jobs available in the market at that time. At the same time, the opportunity to travel those days, it's a career that we dream of,
Right.
working internationally and stuff like that. So that there are a few aspects back then. But at this current point, I believe until now, basically one of the main attraction will be the pay, the initial pay that a fresh grad could get from the industry itself. At the same time, some also would be amazed by the engineering marvel that I believe that would also attract certain people who has interest into this petroleum engineering or even the structural and whatever not. So passion is also there, but I would say the money is the biggest influence.
For the money, right? Yeah, but I heard before from a few engineers that I spoke to in the past, they get quite a lucrative amount of allowances per day. Like, is that true? I mean, of course it's true, but is it like really, really high enough that they're actually excited to go offshore?
In the end, I think you have to ask which phase
I
of time that
see.
you are. I mean, back then my time it was lucrative because I don't think any other industry at that time would challenge the pay, because basic pay is one thing. Basic pay is quite normal compared to other industries. I mean,
Right.
fresh grad at that time you probably get like 3,000 to 4,000 generally. But
No
add on
way.
to that, we also get our daily rates when we work offshore. When we go offshore, once we step on the installation or on the operation side or at site, we get what, say I can say it's around 200 to 500 per day for a fresh grad, which
Right.
is quite a lot. You can earn like 10,000 per month.
Right.
But with the current time, I think the industry is competing for talents with other industry as well, because a lot of industry has actually upped their game for their pay scale. So yes, that touches roughly about those days and currently the perspective of the pay of the
I
industry
see.
as well.
Okay. But even though the pay it sounds exciting, I might switch career in a week. Have you seen the movie Deepwater Horizon?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that ever scare you? Like being offshore, there's a lot of liability, so there's a lot of risks. Does it ever phase you
Oh,
from
okay.
going? Yeah.
So we are paid to go through those to be in that condition or environment. So, but at the same time, I believe safety in general, for the safety policies for offshore working has improved a lot through time. We have lots of cases, stories, compiled reports. Compared to probably 30, 40 years back, it's less or less frequent now compared to those days. So am I scared to work offshore? Or do I feel that everyone, have the feel? Of course, definitely. But I believe, before going offshore, everyone is well trained enough or competent enough to actually adhere to rules, the policies that are being set. And as long as these policies and rules are being adhered to, there shouldn't be a problem. I rarely myself, I've been working offshore for what, 5, 6 years offshore. I've never actually encountered anything serious. I would say that is how do I say, life threatening.
Right.
But I do hear stories from friends who went through certain circumstances, certain events that actually were life threatening as well. So of course, these stories that they shared, they told me about, it actually made me more aware, because we tend to share all these stories so that we keep ourselves, how do I say, work focused, and we learn from other people's experience as well. So like Deepwater Horizon is a good example. I believe the movie probably shows the whole I mean, how the movie portrays the situation, the incidents and stuff like that, I would say it's quite close to how it would be in real life.
Right.
So yes, it's scary, but it's not it's scary, but as long as you as long as the people are very disciplined or they respect the rules and the policies, then it shouldn't be a problem.
And in your experience, like in any of your trips, have you ever had a colleague who actually left the platform after a few days because they couldn't cope with the living conditions?
Directly with me, I mean my direct friend or direct colleague, no, but I've heard friends of friends, stuff like that. Like, there are stories when I
Right.
think this is one of the first trip or second trip where they were asked to fly somewhere. So at the airport, he checked in everything, but he hid himself in the toilet.
No.
Then pretended to miss flights and stuff like that.
Really?
So yeah, I mean, these kind of things do happen. People have fear, and some people tend to fail themselves for certain certifications intentionally just because they don't want to be working offshore. They don't want to
I
go offshore
see.
in general. There are cases, there are quite a lot of cases, I would say. So it's not for everyone.
Mm,
But working in this industry or in the oil and gas in general, you are expected to have at least, especially you are working at the technical side, you have to be expected to have this, a bit of experience of seeing the offshore environment, the operations environment, how it is like. So yeah, I mean, answering to your question, I don't have someone close to me who
right.
who 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 went through all this, but I do hear stories from
Mm.
friends here.
Do you have like any personal memories that you'd like to share or experiences when you were working offshore that,
Uh,
highlight the excitement?
okay, since we are in the context of the what they call, I mean, since we're in the context of the incidents that happened, I mean, like me personally, I didn't go through any bad incidents throughout my 5 years or 6 years working offshore, but um, I'll share a few incidents. I mean, when the first one was probably when I was working in one of the countries around this region, where when I bought the vessel, I just found out that few days back, there was someone who passed away on board just because there was an incident. He fell off the vessel and he couldn't be found. Basically, he fell off the installation and he couldn't be found. Basically, he sunk. I think two of them. And that made me afraid because it was a new country for me.
Yeah,
I felt that the environment wasn't very safe because it was a smaller country. The people working there are new to the industry as well. So I felt a bit scared, and especially the weather during that time was quite bad. I mean, yeah, so it that I think that experience actually scared me.
Mm.
But I stayed true to what I've learned previously, from how I mitigate risks and stuff and make my own decisions. So everything went well. I also had an incident, not myself, it's sharing from a friend where they shared to I mean where it's actually a colleague where there was an incident on an installation on a rig actually, and it was a blowout like what happened on Deepwater Horizon is exactly the same thing. It happened, so he shared with me his experience on how the evacuation went. What did they do? You know, once they bought the lifeboat, what happened after that? And it was quite funny after a few weeks when he told us because the experience was like wow, because when you go through all the trainings, it was controlled. The situation is well controlled. But in real life, everything is so messy. Everyone is rushing. Everyone's running here and there, trying to evacuate the installation and whatnot, right? So it's a nice sharing for us, but I also take it in as a how do I say this, as a lesson learned, even though I didn't go through that event.
Yeah, it's actually very, very fascinating because obviously, like you said, there are a lot of risk and people need to be disciplined when they're working offshore. And obviously a lot of scary experiences from your colleagues. But I would say like would you say it's a very like fun job for you? Like you go offshore and every day is like a new day for you. You get to, I don't know, like build a community with your other.
I believe it's actually a very um, fun environment in general, yeah, because you stay okay when we work offshore, right, there's a few cases like there are people who are permanent at certain location. So there are people who are permanent at certain rigs or platforms where they are there on the month-to-month basis. They will be there 28 days, they will come back and they will go to the same place every month, month, 1 month on, 1 month off. So it's so they're fixed at one platform. So usually these kind of people, they are very close-knit with each other who's working in the same rotation. Like myself, I'm not fixed. When I was working offshore with the company, this company, I wasn't fixed to any installation or any rigs or platform, but I was my role was actually a short-term role on each vessel in each platform and rigs where I have to move around, and my coverage was Asia Pacific. So I did a lot of travel movements and stuff. So every time I go to a new rig or new platform, it's a new experience, a new group of people, new set of people. Some are friendly, some are a bit reserved, some, because especially with the language barriers, especially when I work internationally, it's really hard to communicate with the locals. But what's important is how you carry yourself, how you make yourself not, approachable and stuff like that. So I believe generally I don't have any issues before with anyone offshore. But what's important is you try to make friends. And when you ask me about the communities working offshore, I think generally everyone is it's like a family. Once you have to stay with them for uh 1 month on when you're on shift, and if it's a fixed 1 year, it seems like you have spent 6 months with them, probably more than your family, because yeah, you're eating, sleeping, everything with them, right? So
Yeah.
so that's the environment that you will have actually.
If you could like choose one thing you love about working offshore, what would it be?
I think it's the stress-free. I mean, I've been working working offshore. One thing that I find offshore really interesting is the work stress. I'm talking about work stress, okay? Not stress in general, but the work stress is quite I'm actually free from the work stress, because once we finish our task, usually offshore, it's more like an executional role when you work offshore, so a lot of planning, everything is actually done from office, and basically sent over to offshore to be executed. So once we're offshore, we basically execute the task. As long as we execute the task well, no hiccups, there's not much stress. And once we finish our job, it's done. It's basically over. You don't have to think about anything else. So that's the beauty of working offshore. And I believe that's one of the thing that makes people work offshore, for 20, 30 years, because they don't want to go through all those stress in terms of managing, planning, and stuff like that. So that's one of the good thing working offshore, I believe. Another thing is also I think working offshore, it depends. Some people like that, that isolated life kind of working environment. I do meet people like that, and it's actually quite kind of enjoyable rather than being in office, where you have to go to office, wake up early in the morning, travel 2 hours to office, come back 2 hours, stuff like that. So some people do enjoy the isolated working condition and go back home, have a rest, and come back, and probably that's also another thing that makes the offshore environment very nice, I would say.
And when you mentioned this offshore environment, I saw photos online of you have a lot of cool stuff on the ship, on the rig. So you have game rooms, you have movie rooms, you have like a very big gym, cafeteria. It's well equipped. So how was the living situation for you? Like, did you enjoy it?
This one, it depends on the, how do I say, the accommodation owner,
I see.
or whether who owns the accommodation or the installation or the
Mm.
rigs or platform or whatever. So basically, but generally in an accommodation you will have bunk beds. Sometimes it's two, what they call a double decker, or sometimes it's only a single bed. You have beds, you have well equipped toilets. You will have a big galley where it's like a cafeteria. Food is provided all the time. You eat 6 times. Sorry, food is provided 6 times a day. So so everything there. But at the entertainment part, it depends on uh accommodation, or in country, or depending on the countries. Okay, because generally in Malaysia we have TV rooms. Sometimes we have ping pongs.
Wow.
Sometimes we have the basic stuff. But I've been to places where they even have music room, jamming room,
Really?
even yeah, I've even played golf on one of the offshore vessel. It's an FPSO. So they have like like, how do I say this? A simulator, a golf simulator
Yeah.
station in their accommodation. So it's basically for anyone who can play, right? So I enjoyed my time there playing golf almost every evening. So yeah, so it depends on the country, depends on the commitment of the client to actually invest into entertainment, and provide entertainment for the offshore cruise. But generally, I would say that 28 days it's nothing like to you can always keep yourself entertained with nowadays internet are quite fast compared to probably 10-15 years back. On board those days, it's really hard to get internet for your own personal use. But nowadays,
Mm.
I'm sure almost any installation, it's good enough for you to actually um, call out, like WhatsApp call or whatever.
Mm.
Those days, when I started working offshore last time, I have to buy pay cards. Last time, sorry, I don't know that if you guys went through the pay card period where we have to buy pay card at the mini markets.
Ah.
20-30 bucks, go offshore, and by the time sometimes you have to call another number, then key in your pay card number, then only your intended number. So by the time, and suddenly when the line cut off, 2 ringgit is gone already. Stuff like that. So those days were a bit difficult to communicate
Mm.
with onshore, with your family and friends. But nowadays, I believe with WhatsApp technology, internet, it's a lot better. So 28 days is nothing at all.
Um, so when you're working offshore, can you like share a little bit about how your day-to-day life was all about? Perhaps your work shifts and your schedule. Did you have some sort of like a an offshore rotation where you were on the vessel or the oil rig for a certain amount of time, and then you had a couple of months off to be back with your friends and family?
Okay, a normal routine for most offshore workers are actually this is the general one, one month on, 1 month off, which is 28 days on, 28 days off. And on site or on operations hours, you are not supposed to work more than 12 hours a day. So it's usually 12 hours shift. So there will be usually two people in the same role per day. So it's a morning shift or night shift, like, basically. So yeah, generally that's the standard working shift. But like for my case, last time I was more on a standby role, where I go offshore, one personnel. It's an on the job kind of role, where they will call me in to work whenever I am required. So usually I go up, I'll stand by, wait for the call. So once they're ready to run go run through my operations, or my tasks, so I will go and perform the task. It might be even more than 12 hours sometimes, but it's quite rare lah. But usually I don't exceed 12 hours, but sometimes I do actually exceed 18-19 hours. So that's gonna be a bit of a fatigue for myself. But that's generally overall about the work time here. It's usually 12 hours, 12 hours. At the same time, some roles requires you to actually execute tasks on the job. Other than that, of hours, usually what we do is we go for we entertain ourselves in we connect with our families back at home through WhatsApp, internet, or whatever. Then also we also have this TV. We have Astros mostly on most vessels, or even almost any rig. They do provide Astros. We can watch football and everything. Not movies on board. We are still in touch with the how do I say it? With the civilization in KL, I would say. Since I'm from KL, but we are still in touch with civilization. So yeah, that's overall that we do on day-to-day basis lah. The first few days is also okay because we just reached there, we don't. But probably the toughest part is when the second week or third week kicks in. Usually the second week kicks in. You feel like it's still a long way to go before you're coming back. And when you reach the last week, the fourth week, you usually feel the time flies so fast because you're almost going back, right? So
Mm.
so these are the common phase that we go through lah.
Yeah, because I thought you guys would be scared to be like out of touch with like the things happening back on land. But it's nice to know that you guys are still very much updated and stuff like that. And I understand that there's a lot of like rules that you guys have to follow when you're working offshore. What's the number one rule that the workers have to follow? Like, were the security very tight and like maybe something about safety?
Yeah, I mean, generally, safety concerns are the number one priority offshore. Basically, anything you do, no matter what, you are allowed to stop the job if you find it not safe. So that's the number one rule. Feel free to stop the job if it's not safe. Safety is everyone's priority. Uh, there are a golden sets of rules for each company, but generally it's almost similar for every company. Usually they have the 12 life-saving rules, like we have this a campaign called Zero Tolerance by certain companies and stuff. So these are the rules that are set in place by companies or by national oil companies to actually ensure that everyone works safely. So in the end, we know that working offshore, number one, is all about safety. So I would say that is the number one rule that we have to follow. You are allowed to stop. But in certain countries, I've been to, say for example, Australia. I've worked offshore Australia before. Number one rule is just also safety, but they have also included the environmental aspect as well for as part of the operations, meaning that um, we are supposed to stop when, for example, that when there's a whale migration, turtle migration, and stuff like that, and that there'll be always an observer on standby. And if it's noticed that there are, all these marine animals on migration and stuff like that, they have to stop operations to allow this migration to happen first. It doesn't matter how long it takes, probably 1-2 hours, and 1-2 hours for an oil company is a lot because the cost per day is very, very high. Or even the cost per hour is very high. So but for the cases like for countries like Australia where they take consideration of environment very highly, these are an example of things that they actually do or implement. So it's actually interesting. Like for us, we don't really have it here in Malaysia yet, or I don't think we have it yet. But when I was working on Australia for a while, we did stop operations just because I think it was the dolphins or something that were swimming around, and we were asked to stop the operations.
You mentioned that when you were working, you were still able to keep in touch with your friends and family. But obviously, it was hard staying away from them very long. Um, and obviously, it would take a toll on you mentally. So, how did you particularly cope with being away for so long?
Um, okay. Being away for so long, of course, I mean, the ideal situation is that you are at home working offshore, come back day to day, but it's impossible, right? So being away from home to work offshore, um, it's actually not so bad if the environment or the condition of the workplace is okay. So I never had issues with working offshore as long as there's internet connectivity. I can call home, connect with home. There's no issue. But I only have issue with when the working condition is not so great. I would say, So and when I said okay, I'll share an experience. So this was me when I was asked to work in Papua New Guinea. And I'm sure you cannot imagine how Papua New Guinea. I'm not sure if you have been to Papua New Guinea, then maybe you might imagine, but I doubt you have been to Papua New Guinea before. So I was tasked to work. Actually, it was an onshore job. So when I was in Papua New Guinea, my first site that I have to go to was an onshore site in a place deep down, deep inside the jungle, where they have actually secluded the area with, or sorry, they have actually managed the area as a onshore or drilling site, and they have actually put guards and everything. So it's very deep downside. You have to take two choppers to fly two choppers in to the sites, and that is one of my, I would say, worst working condition, because first of all, you have to stay inside tents. So these tents are placed inside the big tents where they will put in air conditioning and stuff like that. But your own cabin will be like a small tent with just one small bed, with a fan inside the tent. That's fine. That's still manageable. But what's not manageable is that you have to the shower. Basically, they set up a mobile shower cabin where the waters pumped into this shower are pumped from this the what do you call this from a muddy kind of lake, or basically a swamp, I say. So this warm water was basically just filtered out for probably high level, high micron what do you call debris and stuff like that. But the water is still yellow, and actually it's actually it contains what they call that bacteria, not say amoeba, I can't remember the name, but it's basically yellow water. You have to shower in that. You're not allowed to put that water in your mouth. Basically, you can gargle with bottled water, or brush your teeth with bottled water. But basically, I have to go through that period for 1 month. So that felt very long. And the working condition is very bad, because you're in the middle of the jungle while you're working onshore. You see all these kind of animals, snakes, insects, and whatever not. So that's one of the challenging environment I have went to, and I would say that working offshore is a lot more better, because working offshore, most current standard of working offshore, current standard of accommodation is, I would say, it's top notch. So I would prefer to work offshore actually.
Speaking about the yellow water in PNG, did you actually got sick from that?
When I first arrived at the site, I mean, when I thought, I was told I was supposed to go to Papua New Guinea, I was like, really? So once I landed at the airport, I was like, oh, okay, it's actually not so bad, because the airport was like
Clean,
tip-top.
it was nice. Yeah.
You have coffee club.
Right.
They have a lot of Australian cafes and stuff. So it was really nice. But as soon as I step out of the airport, then I see the real Papua New Guinea, because the
real.
capital city is basically expat infested.
I
They're
see.
not the real Papua New Guineans, Once you step out of Port Moresby, then you will see the real Papua New Guinea. And when I went to the site, I decided not to work for 3 days. I mean, I was there. I was there to stand by. I was there to stand by, but basically during standby, you have to go out every day to actually check your equipments and stuff. Just do some checks and whatever not. But I decided not to do that for 3 days,
Yeah.
because I got frustrated with the living condition. So yeah. So after that, then after the third day, fourth day, I made friends, stuff like that. So I mean,
And then it got more bearable.
I mean, things got a bit more comfortable, manageable. Yeah. So I used to smoke back then, so I will always hang out at the smoking areas and stuff. So
I
that's
see.
fine. But at night time, the working condition is not really good, because, like I said, there's a lot of insects. You know how we dress up. We have coveralls, we have boots, we have safety glasses and helmets. So whenever I go out, step outside at the work site to check my tools or do anything at night, you will see knocking sounds on my helmet because of the insects. They're flying around here and there, knock here, knock there. So yeah, so it's an experience. But if you ask me to repeat, I would not love to do it.
To do it again. Yeah. Okay. And speaking
No,
about
I won't do it.
and speaking about conducive like working environments, obviously like PNG was a not so good example, but you also have the topic of safety. So safety is always first, especially more when you're offshore. And offshore you have something called BOSIET, so basic offshore safety induction and emergency training. It's quite a tiresome well, I would imagine it's quite a tiresome process, and you even have to do a helicopter training, like HUET. So, what was the process like for you getting that training, like BOSIAT training?
BOSET, it's a requirement for almost any offshore
Mm,
field work. It's a requirement. Under BOSET itself, there's also a few types of BOSET, I would say. So BOSET, I'm sure everyone should know that it stands for Basic Offshore Safety Induction and Emergency Training, right? So under that also we have a category like tropical waters. It's called T-BOSET, or there's also cold waters BOSET, where the difference the concept is similar, the trainings you go are similar, but the difference are like you have to do extra trainings in terms of immersive suit with the cold water. Because if you cold waters are usually applied to countries where you have to operate in cold, especially the North Sea. So that's a requirement. So you will have, when you board a chopper North Sea, you have to wear a special suit on the to board a helicopter in case of emergency landing or crash. You don't get hypothermia for
mm,
if there's any crash landing or whatever. So these are a few categories of BOSET. There's also the breathing systems that you have to go through. That when we go on board helicopters, when we fly helis, we have to wear a special breathing apparatus where this apparatus can offer you temporary breathing support if you are you know uh,
having
drowning, or you
trouble.
are
Yeah.
immersive inside the water for a short period of time. So overall, it's a required training. Is it exhausting? It's exhausting at the theory part, meaning that when you have to do classroom sessions, that's very boring.
Mm,
But the practical part is actually quite fun because I like water. I like swimming. I like water. But some people are not really keen at, at that part, especially the
you
helicopter
mean they're
training.
not that good?
Uh,
Okay. Earlier,
they just they probably fear water. So
pure water. Okay.
yeah. So I've seen failed people who in Malay we call mati mati, um don't want to do the helicopter training, but it's compulsory, to do that
Mm,
helicopters training.
mm. And earlier on, you mentioned people actually they try to fail on purpose because they don't want to go offshore. How could you tell actually
Mm-hmm.
when they purposely want to fail their BOSIAT? Like, is there a way to
Uh,
tell? Like, do they take
uh,
the exam like 5 times and they still fail? Then you say, oh, they really don't want to go.
no, sometimes they will, when you ask them to do set, they will keep asking, "Oh, I'm not ready. I'm not
Ah,
healthy," and stuff
right,
like that.
right. Making
Uh,
excuses. I
at, at,
see.
at the site, yeah, to go through BOSET so that they don't want to go offshore. Say, oh, I
Mm,
cannot go offshore because I don't have BOSET. I cannot take BOSET because I'm probably not healthy. I cannot, stuff like that. They will come up with excuses. Or even to go offshore, you have to go through a health checkup. So you can't be obese at a certain level. There's a BMI that you need to adhere to and stuff like that. So these are a few things that they try not to go through just for them not to go offshore. But
mm,
BOSET himself, I've seen people not to say fail, but they didn't complete the BOSET just
I
because
see.
they don't want to do the water exercises, and in the end the instructors gave up lah. So basically
Mm,
they cannot pass this guy.
And would they get penalized if they don't complete the training and they can't go offshore?
And that's depending on the company, but
I see.
I assume that most companies would not keep you lah.
I see.
if you can't work for them, there's no point unless
Right.
if it's a it's your role doesn't require you to work offshore, but it's just that you are doing this project for you to visit, then probably they will switch you with someone else to actually perform, stuff like
Mm.
audits or offshore meetings and stuff like that.
And speaking of like offshore career opportunities, what would you say are like the typical like entry level positions to get into that career path?
Oh, that's a lot. That's really a lot. It's really hard
Mm.
to actually specify, depending on your role, your background, what did you graduate from, geology, engineering, even IT. Nowadays there are demand for IT graduates or software graduates within the oil and gas industry as well. So in the end, the opportunity is very, very big. Yeah, but if you ask me in the sense of your career path, or how do you in terms of career growth inside the offshore industry, there I can say that's mainly two. Okay, one is basically being a technical guy, or one is or being biased towards the management side. So basically, once when you started off, right, usually you go through a few years of offshore period, working offshore experience, getting your offshore experience. Doesn't matter if you work with the national oil company or working with a contractor or a small service company, they will definitely put you offshore to gain that experience, to see what's happening. At the same time, by probably the third, fourth, fifth year, you tend to decide already whether you want to pursue offshore life, or you
Mm.
want to actually divert or change your path towards management. So these are the two paths that you should. So if you go through offshore life, then you most likely be working offshore throughout your working career, I would say. It's a good opportunity to actually make money. As you grow more experience, the demand for people like you will be huge, and the pay will definitely be bigger. You can earn a lot, probably a lot more than people working at the corporate level office. But some
Mm.
people are a bit more inclined towards corporate or management side, so they would choose the management route, where they will do more management stuff. Um, so these are the two career paths that you can go through. One more technical, one is more corporate or management stuff, I would say.
Mm. And on the
Mm.
topic of career path that you just mentioned, I think one topic that has been quite gaining focus in recent years, months is obviously the future for offshore engineering. So considering that there's a lot of climate activists, a lot of organizations calling for no more new, oil field developments or license renewal. How does that affect the offshore engineering future? Like, what does it look like now?
In the end, I think this kind of topics, or when we touch into environment or sustainability,
Yeah,
I believe that the industry has to adapt to the transition, or it has to transition. So maybe in the future we might not be going offshore for any oil production or for oil and gas, but we can also go offshore for other newer
projects.
energy
Right.
projects. It
Mm.
could be like okay, nowadays we have offshore windmill plants and stuff like
Mm.
that. It's not happening in Malaysia yet, I would say, so people don't really see. But in the European countries, even in probably China, Taiwan, or the northern hemisphere countries, there's a lot of
Yeah.
offshore renewable energy sites for offshore windmills. So these are the projects that we people are working offshore could transition into. At the same time, there's also a transition, in terms of adaptation of digitalization technology. Now we have a lot of emerging techs like drones, AIs, and whatever not, right?
Mm.
So this kind of equipment, these kind of technologies are actually not being adopted fully yet in Malaysia, I would say, because of the cost to actually implement, to adopt them, is quite high, the capital. But for countries like the European countries, especially the richer countries, they do adopt this a lot, because they are able to reduce the headcount working offshore.
Mm.
And when I say reducing the headcount working offshore, is it good? It's good in the sense that the risk of HSC is a lot lower. A lot of things the you know, and it also leads to a more environmental friendly kind of setup. Countries like like Norway or Scandinavian countries, they have regulations that you can't work more than 2 weeks. So if you're working offshore in Norway, for example, right? This is what I understand, yeah. You cannot work more than 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, you have to crew change, and that's actually a lot of cost, doing this crew
Mm.
change of personnel every 2 weeks. Compared to us, I don't think we can adopt that because the cost is going to be very high for a lot of projects. So we are still sticking at the one month on, 1 month off. But moving forward with technology for them, they could replace this crew change, the cost that they are doing with this crew change with technologies, adaptation of this digitalization of certain processes, computer. Now that the popular ones, for example, drilling, there's also remote drilling and stuff like that. So I believe that moving forward, the headcount will be a lot lower working offshore. People are going to work in the oil and gas industry or in the energy industry. Um, but probably remotely from office,
I
and
see.
the skills required are a lot more different than probably 20 30 years ago. Those days, to work in oil and gas, you have to be fit, strong, a lot of hard labor. But nowadays, a lot of tasks is actually, using tech. It's a lot more easier in terms of executing it. And you see with this transition, right, you can see that a lot more, especially women, I would say, especially women are capable to do job, because those days, because of the condition being very harsh, at the same time the labor need to execute certain tasks is actually very high. So the capability of female workers are not there, because naturally there's a gap in terms of strength and stuff like that.
Right.
But nowadays you see a lot more female offshore workers, just because that they can actually execute the same task without the need of that high level of labor intensity and stuff like that.
Mm. And also hearing that Malaysia has not that big of a progress in greener projects offshore. I find that a bit concerning, especially because Malaysia does have a very ambitious goal. So we have a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That's like 20 how much? 27 years from now. In part of this goal, do you know if we are actually collaborating, or do we have any plans to collaborate with any other countries with that green expertise?
I won't say, sorry, I think the context is a bit different. I'm not saying that Malaysia is not moving towards
Yeah,
the idea of sustainability or being net
yeah,
zero and everything. So, but at the same time, there is a lot of effort. At the moment, I would say Malaysia is at a very early planning stage.
mm,
There's a lot of effort has been done. Everyone is actually on board with the idea of achieving net zero carbon, along with the Paris Agreement. We have the SDG goals and whatever not, right?
yeah,
So I believe most countries, especially operating in Asia, they are actually transitioning towards that. It's still at a very early phase. I believe Malaysia, among Southeast Asian countries, is ahead of others. But to compare with a lot of developed countries, we are still not there yet, just because of the capability of them being able to absorb costs. Because in the end, they have a lot, the cost of operating in developed countries, especially oil and gas, is very, very high. They have a lot of taxes. We don't have that here yet.
yeah.
So slowly we are moving towards that, but it has to go along with the probably the country's economy layout and
Abilities.
stuff like that.
Mm,
Yeah, because like I said, I wouldn't say that we are not moving, that we are moving towards that. We can see that from a lot of companies, a lot of um all these strategies and campaigns by these bigger companies, but it's still at a very early phase, I would say.
Mm. And from your previous answers, you've shared a lot of like unique experiences about the offshore life. So perhaps like, do you have any advice you would give to our listeners who are aspiring to progress and advance in their careers within the offshore sector?
Uh, yes, of course. I mean, I think the perception nowadays towards offshore, how do I say it, offshore work or offshore roles are not, probably they feel that, oh, newer people or younger people are not actually interested into all this. I kind of disagree on that, because I've met a lot of younger people, especially younger engineering graduates who came into my company or work with me as interns and stuff like that. There's still a lot of number, especially people, those who are uh from the suburb environment, or community, because they believe that the pay is good for them, especially, and they wouldn't want to transition into the city life to actually be paid more, or get a higher pay. So for them, working offshore is actually quite attractive, where they can stay home where they are living in, the environment that they're living in. At the same time, they can still earn quite high. So my advice to them is just grab it, whatever chance you can get. What's important is for you to continue to learn. Um, Always explore opportunities, meet people, always keep your options open when you speak with people, keep your mind open. One of the reasons why I first jumped into um, this industry is actually the opportunity given by my previous employee, lah. My previous superior, I would say. So it was just a coincidence, because at the time I wasn't I would say a great student back then. My scores wasn't that great. So the opportunity to jump into the field or the oil and gas industry is actually quite limited at that time for myself. But just because yeah, I get to know him through a friend, and he said he decided to give me an opportunity to work with him. So I joined him. Then from then on, I start to know people, progress. I start to grow myself. So in the end, opportunities keep on coming here and there. Then that's how you actually grow yourself inside this industry as well. So yeah, like I mentioned, try not to grow, keep yourself restricted to certain understanding. Grow yourself, learn more. It's always good to continuously learn. So yeah, that's a few advice I can share actually.
Hmm. And I actually have one more question, last question for today. Well, we've learned that you're currently not working offshore anymore.
Yep.
You're working as an operations performance manager. Can you maybe like share what was the reason why you didn't continue in the offshore career path, or like why you stopped?
I think it's similar to when I mentioned earlier, when after 5 6 years, there are two routes that you could choose, I would say. And it's either you continue working offshore and grow with the role being offshore, or you would want to work management onshore, or at a corporate. So that's more of myself, where I see myself. I like the management side, the strategy, the thoughts of strategizing, planning. That's me. I know it's a bit more stressful compared working to offshore actually, but it's what I love more, I would say. That's more of my passion, I would say.
Wow, that's really interesting. But yeah, we can definitely learn that the offshore life is definitely not glitz and glam. It's very fascinating, and well, it's a high-paying job that obviously comes with its challenges and its risks. But I would say at the end of the day, it can be a very rewarding and exciting working experience. And knowing how much the workers offshore go through every day, we can definitely give them much more appreciation for their tremendous hard work. So thank you. And a big shout out to all of the offshore community and our listeners in the industry. And a huge thank you for Soup for sharing your amazing experiences and insights about the offshore life. Honestly, as someone who didn't really know much about the offshore engineering or what it's like working at sea, I learned so much from you, and like listening to your stories is like very eye-opening. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate it. It's an experience for me to actually be on a podcast. It's something like I love to talk. It's just that I've never, how do I say it?
Got
I've
a
never
chance.
actually thought of how to come up with a podcast of
Uh,
my own. Maybe one day I would love
mm,
to, but I need to figure out what kind of content I need to create, because now it's an era of content creation, right?
yeah.
Everyone wants to create content. So yeah, but thank you very much for this opportunity as well.
Mm. You have really great stories and you're really good at like public speaking. So definitely you should make your own podcast one day. And
Thank you.
yeah. To all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and share this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Trees Engineering's YouTube channel to see more exciting podcast episodes from us, as well as follow us on LinkedIn to find more career opportunities for EPC projects and other fun updates from us. And if you're interested in freelancing in the energy sector, check us out at our website at tree-engineering.com to sign up in our marketplace. That's all from us. And thank you so much and see you around.
Thank you so much. Bye bye, everyone. Take care.